imagine this. A silence so deep it feels almost, I don't know, physical, like a weight. And pair that with a cold that just gets right into your bones.
Yeah, bone chilling doesn't even quite cover it sometimes.
Right. Now, picture trying to navigate that, but your supplies are running out, and every single step could literally be your last. That's the kind of brutal reality we're stepping into today. It comes from a source you sent in, Jack London's really stark, unforgettable short story, The White Silence.
And what London does so well, I think, is just plunge you straight into this harsh Yukon territory. It feels so immediate, so raw.
It really does.
It's definitely more than just, an adventure story. It's this powerful look at how the environment, these extreme situations, they just strip everything away. You see the core of people. Sometimes it's pretty unsettling.
Totally unsettling. So our goal with this deep dive is sort of journey alongside these characters, try to really grasp the almost unimaginable challenges they faced. Arctic travel back then, late 19th century.
Just incredibly difficult.
And to really wrestle with those life or death decisions. We want to understand the events, sure, but also what they tell us about human resilience, the sheer power of nature, and maybe those complex bonds that form when just staying alive is the only thing that matters.
Okay, so let's get our bearings. The group is small. There's Mason, his wife Ruth. The story identifies her as an Indian woman, and then this character called Malamute Kid.
And the situation they're in, predicament, feels like too mild a word.
It really does. It's dire.
Dire seems about right. They've got 200 miles of completely unbroken wilderness ahead of them.
Untracked snow, yeah.
And only 6 days worth of food left for the 3 people. And here's the bit that just hit you. 0 food left for the dogs pulling the sled.
Nothing.
That one detail just, bam, throws the whole situation into sharp focus, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What do you think the immediate impact of that detail is? No food for the dogs.
Well, it instantly tells you the stakes are life and death. Not just for the people, but for the animals they absolutely depend on.
Right, they need them to get out.
Exactly. It forces you, the reader, right from the start to confront this brutal calculus of survival. You immediately understand that choices you wouldn't even consider normally are going to have to be made.
Yeah. And London even gives us these little details, like Mason naming the dogs Parman, Cassiar, Siwash, Husky, Shukum. It seems small, but it adds character, maybe even foreshadows a bit, especially with his comments about dogs with fancy names.
It adds a layer.
And then Malamute Kid just states it bluntly, no more lunches after day 1. That really hammers home how fast things are going downhill.
Oh, yeah. That declaration just underlines the immediate, relentless pressure. No cushion, no fallback.
None.
And this desperate lack of resources, it just makes the journey itself seem even more impossible. Which brings us to, the sheer brutality of the trail itself. London's descriptions of the labor involved, they're incredibly vivid.
Oh, man. It sounds just utterly exhausting the way he describes snowshoeing. Sinking up to your knees every step. Then you have to lift your legs straight up, perfectly vertical, can't deviate an inch. He says someone trying it for the first time would be wiped out after just 100 yards.
Completely spent.
You could almost feel that strain, the burn in your muscles, the sheer willpower just to keep going day after day.
And it's in that context, that extreme physical effort, that London introduces this really powerful idea, like the white silence.
Right.
It's not just, seeing endless snow. It's the absence of sound, this almost oppressive stillness, clear sky, biting cold.
And feeling tiny.
Exactly. That overwhelming sense of being insignificant against this vast, indifferent landscape. What really strikes you about how he depicts that white silence?
I think it's the psychological part, the weight of it. He talks about how it brings up these strange thoughts you didn't summon, like you're suddenly face to face with your own mortality, the scale of the universe, and this almost primal sort of yearning for something more than just that frozen world. It's like the silence itself forces you to confront your deepest stuff, your fears, vulnerability.
Precisely. And it's in that pressure cooker, extreme physical hardship, intense psychological stress that you start seeing conflict bubble up. Even brutality. Yeah. There's that key moment at the steep riverbank. The dogs just can't get the sled up. It's a major setback.
And this is where you see a darker side of Mason. The dogs are obviously weak, starving, exhausted.
Clearly.
But he goes straight for the whip, especially on Carmen, the dog he'd already kind of badmouthed. It's jarring, isn't it? It really shows how desperation can just erode empathy. What's that incident tell us about how extreme conditions affect people?
Well, it highlights how, under that kind of intense pressure, the immediate need to survive can just override compassion. Mason's actions, harsh as they are, maybe they're partly driven by his own fear, his desperation just to keep moving.
Maybe. But then you have Malamute Kid's reaction, which is so different.
Such a stark contrast, yeah. Malamute Kid actually pleads with Mason, tells him to stop because he sees how weak the dogs are.
Okay.
And London even describes Kid struggling to get the dogs moving himself, and he's almost in tears, feeling their suffering.
Wow.
That contrast really puts a spotlight on the different ways people cope, how they react to hardship in those extremes. What does Kid's empathy tell us about him, do you think?
Well, it suggests he has this deeper connection, maybe, to the living things around him, even in that brutal place.
Hmm.
It shows a kind of resilience that isn't just physical toughness, but also holding on to compassion,
Yeah.
even when things are at their absolute worst. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, what qualities are really most important for survival? Physically and maybe morally, too.
That's a good question. And then things get even worse. We hit the big turning point, the event that just shatters their already fragile situation.
Yeah.
Falling tree.
Oh, yeah. And London builds the tension so well. He describes the dense woods, zooms in on this one ancient pine tree, been standing there for generations.
Yeah.
The way the accident unfolds, it's almost like surreal. Mason just stops for a second, adjusts his moccasin.
Such a small, mundane thing. Exactly. The dogs lie down in this sudden, eerie quiet. And then there's this sound, this ominous sigh in the air, like a warning
Chilling.
before the crash, and Mason's just struck right on the shoulder. Brutal. Instant.
But even in that shock, that horror, both Malamute Kid and Ruth react incredibly fast. Ruth's quiet efficiency, her stoicism, it's really striking.
Amazing, isn't it?
They immediately try to get the pressure off Mason. Malamute Kid starts hacking away at this massive tree with his axe in minus 65-degree cold.
Unbelievable cold.
Their instinct is just fight. Fight to survive. They've managed to rig up some kind of shelter, get a fire going, just desperately trying to keep Mason alive.
Yeah.
What does that immediate focus response tell us about their resilience?
It just shows this ingrained ability to act, even when things seem completely overwhelming. Ruth's quiet competence, Kid's frantic effort, it's this deep-seated will to survive, to help their friend. It's resilience that's both, practical and just deeply human.
But it becomes clear pretty quickly just how bad Mason's injuries are.
Yeah, the hope drains away fast.
There's this stark realization. His chances are basically zero. And what's really poignant is how London describes his mental state. He sort of drifts off, reliving his childhood in Tennessee, speaking in his old Southern dialect. What's the significance of that shift?
It really highlights the massive gap, doesn't it, between his past life, warmth, familiarity, and the just brutal present. It's a common thing psychologically in extreme trauma, retreating to happier memories as a kind of escape from unbearable pain.
Makes sense.
And while Ruth, she can't understand his words, his dialect, Malamute Kid does, because Kid has his own connections to the world outside. It underlines that shared understanding, that bond between the two men that Ruth doesn't quite share.
Right. And then come Mason's last wishes. His main concern, overwhelmingly, is for Ruth and their unborn child.
Yeah.
He really hopes it's a boy. And he gives Malamute Kid these very specific instructions. Make sure Ruth doesn't go back to her people permanently, get the child educated in the States, make sure he never comes back to the Northland.
Sell the furs, handle his assets.
Even as he's dying, his focus is on securing their future. What does that tell us? Focusing on the child's future right at the end.
It speaks to that fundamental human drive, I think, to project ourselves forward, ensure something continues beyond us even when our own time is up.
Like leaving a legacy.
Exactly. And his specific instructions, they show he understands the different worlds involved, Ruth's world, and the one he wants for his child. He's trying to give them the best chance, as he sees it.
Then there's that awful discussion about how long Malamute Kid should stay. It's just gut-wrenching.
Agonizing.
Mason gets it. He knows Kid has to leave to save himself and Ruth. They finally agree on one more day, but you can tell how painful that decision is.
Yeah.
And then, Mason's final request.
Hmm.
For a mercy killing. And his goodbye to Ruth. It's just profound connection and total despair all at once. That moment really brings home the impossible choices they're forced into.
It really forces us as readers to confront the ethical nightmare of survival in that extreme. Mason's request, the burden of that decision on Malamute Kid, it's about the agonizing choices people can be forced to make when faced with inevitable suffering and the need to prioritize survival.
And even in his very, very last moments, he whispers something about panning gold near a slide. Just a small, almost everyday detail.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful reminder of the human element in the middle of this huge tragedy.
It really is a poignant detail. It grounds these extraordinary events in ordinary human hopes, concerns that persist right up to the end.
So Mason dies,
Yeah.
and the immediate aftermath just throws Malamute Kid into this terrible internal conflict. He's grieving his friend,
Of course.
but he knows acutely they need to survive, which leads to this truly desperate scramble for food.
Oh, that scene where the starving dogs go after the last scraps of food, the dried salmon, that little bit of flour, it's so visceral, so brutal.
And Ruth is right in there fighting them off. It really underscores her own fierce will to live.
Absolutely. And then the grim necessity, they have to butcher one of the dogs for food. It just illustrates the desperate measures they're driven to.
We're fine.
And then the pack just deteriorates further. They end up turning on Carmen, killing her. It's a truly harrowing picture of what extreme hunger does in that environment. Ruth being so active in that fight for food, what does that show us about her?
It shows incredible inner strength, I think.
Yeah.
A primal survival instinct. Despite everything she's lost, all the hardship, she's not passive at all. She's fighting for herself, and you have to think, for her unborn child's future, too.
Yeah, definitely. So facing these horrors, Malamute Kid does some incredibly pragmatic things. He builds a platform to protect Mason's body from animals, a final act of respect.
Right, even then.
And Ruth, quietly obeying her husband's last wishes, she just takes charge of the remaining dogs and heads down the trail. What do those actions tell us about how they're each approaching survival right then?
Well, Kid's action shows that sense of duty, respect for the dead, even when survival is paramount. Ruth's obedience. Well, looking at it now is different, but in the story's context, it shows her sticking to Mason's requests, maybe a kind of culturally influenced acceptance of this is what needs to happen now.
Right. While Kid has to endure that agonizing wait by the fire for Mason to actually pass away, the white silence just pressing in, amplifying his fear, his grief.
It's been terrible.
Then the eventual act of mercy and his desperate flight across the snow with the dogs. It just brings this awful chapter to a close.
Yeah, what a story.
It really leaves Kid and Ruth facing this incredibly uncertain future, totally shaped by the brutal things they've just lived through.
So, as we kind of pull back from this deep dive into the white silence, what are the main takeaways for you? It seems pretty clear London just masterfully shows the extreme physical, emotional demands of surviving in the Klondike.
Oh, absolutely.
The intense, really complicated relationships that form under that kind of pressure, and that stark, often brutal contrast between, human willpower and just the indifference of nature.
Exactly. We saw those moments of incredible human resilience, didn't we? Against unimaginable hardship, the sheer weight of responsibility in those life or death moments.
Yeah.
And those really poignant glimpses into their pasts, their hopes for the future, all playing out against this overwhelming, totally unforgiving landscape.
Okay, so here's a final thought, something for you listening to mull over. What do you think your breaking point might be in an environment like that? What core values do you believe would actually guide your decisions when you're facing truly impossible choices?
It's a tough one.
And how does really digging into these extreme fictional scenarios, even from, the safety of our homes, how does that inform how we look at our own everyday challenges? And maybe the fundamental importance of human connection, even when those connections are tested right to their absolute limit.
It definitely puts things in perspective.
Yeah. And remember, this deep dive came from material you submitted, so thank you again for sharing this really powerful, really thought-provoking story with us.
And please keep sending in your suggestions. We love seeing what you want us to explore. What other sources can we dig into together? What other fascinating deep dives are out there?